Yeah, I just realized the audio was muted, so people probably couldn't hear me a second ago. So let's do that again. Let's just introduce to the series. What are we going to be doing? But that's really it. I think like basically try to cover the basics. We'll start with the basics. Today we'll just look at I think really simple stuff as what are containers, why do you want to use containers, when not to use containers, and some easy ways to get started. That's what we'll cover today. But overall in the series, I think we want to just try to cover like the various aspects and also get into the details of the different building blocks in Kubernetes, services, ingress, and volumes, etc. Yeah, Brian? Yeah. Um, I think I think I think this. I mean, it depends on the situation you're on, obviously, right? It always depends. But what would you want to use them? I mean, I think you should always look at the situation you're in. Some people are starting off building a totally brand new application. I think for someone who's building a brand new application, it kind of makes a lot of sense to just start with containers because you can decide the way you build the application. You can make sure that it's like cloud native or based on microservices from the beginning. So 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 basically you start with the right architecture that's fit for containers, and it'll make your life easier as well. I think for certain companies um, who's already, let's say, have existing applications, they're already built, we're probably looking at again, it depends on, are they looking to change those monolithic applications? Do they have a plan to already change those into maybe something microservice based, or do they just want to keep the monolith as it is and move it to containers? So it kind of depends on the situation. But I think some really good. That's all right. Oh, really? Okay, that is your audio is on. It should be going through. Let me double check here if your audio is. It looks like you are on, but
Yeah.
can you guys hear Brian?
Can you hear me?
This is the fun part about doing live stuff, right? It doesn't get
Yeah.
more real than this. Audio not working.
Okay, I think it's coming through now. Can you give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me okay? Oh, sweet. Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for quick answer.
Fantastic. All right, where were we? So we were talking about. I think you said when to do containers, right? Or why should you do containers? Like I said, I think yeah. So I just gave a few situations. Containers, it's really easy to move them around. You kind of have your application, the dependencies and everything inside this package. So sharing it across development teams, sharing it between different environments, I think that makes it really easy. What do you say, Brian? What
Yeah.
else? Why?
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Like I love the fact that containers, if it's microservices based, you can have shared functions across applications. So you don't have to write down the same kind of small bit of code every single time. And you can kind of just package it, repackage it, and just send it across and use it across applications, which makes life a lot easier for developers.
Why else? Why else would you want to use containers?
They're also just they're quicker to boot than VMs and that sort of thing. The ease of packaging the application with Docker as well makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's my kind of go-to with it. It's if you have a monolith application though, I see why you might want to stick with that. It's going to be harder to move it across. But if you're building natively a brand new application, it's much easier to go with the microservice-based architecture and go straight into containers. Because for DevOps or deployment stuff like that, it's a lot quicker to deploy. You could just take out the segments you want to, or the little services or the APIs you want to change at a time, as opposed to having to kind of rejig the whole monolith application.
Yeah. I think one of the things about containers as well, the whole thing about being immutable, right? Being able to take something. I mean, I think most people who've been working in operations or even in development is one of the typical things is when you take and want to deploy something on staging or production or whatever, it's like the first answer you get, well, it was working on my laptop. You always get that, right? It was working before I deployed, before I deployed it, before I committed or whatever, and the whole, being able to streamline different environments. And I know there've been other tools, helping with this before containers came along. There's been, infrastructure as code has been really big since 2008 or something, or it started around there, and then it's become really big. But I think kind of containers has kind of taken over a little bit. Apply, the modules or playbooks you've set up. So that was streamline your environment. That kind of helped a bit, but now I think it's even more. By packaging everything inside the container, I think from an ops side, you kind of don't have to build this. You don't have to worry about all different environments. And I think this is one of the really big arguments for doing containers is instead of having to manage different types of environments. Where you'll have your Java application with all the Java dependencies, you'll have the PHP application with all the the PHP dependencies, Ruby and Rails, whatever else. And since a lot of people want to build in various languages today, it's kind of as from an operations side, you really have to manage a lot of different environments, a lot of dependencies, a lot of languages and stuff. And when you put that inside the container, and instead just let's say if you choose to go with things like Kubernetes, all you have to worry about is the underlying orchestrator. I think that's a really big point from an ops side. And Brian, I don't know what I think for even deployment. I think, and we'll get into this later on, but I think deployment, when using things like Helm charts, and we'll get into what Helm charts are and how to use them and stuff, but packaging applications as well with Helm charts is really nice as well. And kind of really eases the thing as well. I think we've kind of covered now why we want to do it. I think one of the important parts is and this is typically something we see always with us techies, we as soon as there's something new, everyone want to jump on it, and you kind of have a bias that you just want to do it without really thinking about, is it really the right thing for me? So when shouldn't you be doing containers? What's a sign of a no-go? Don't do containers.
I suppose a big no-go for containers if you're massive into your security. You don't want to expose, you don't have the shared kernel which containers use, whereas VMs don't have a shared kernel, so there's a little less isolation there. And also, pace is a big aspect for you as well. VMs, if you VM, they are faster than VMs, but you're not going to beat the pace of standard bare metal, because it has yes, containers have less overhead than a VM, but the likes of bare metal, you're just not going to have the matched pace as you would, because you have way less overheads than again when you go to bare metal.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd like to add on that, Hassan?
Yeah. You could also argue that with containers you could run them directly on containers with bare metal. You get the power of bare metal, but at the same time you get the flexibility of native containers.
Yeah. True.
And with something like again Kubernetes or some other type of container orchestrator, it kind of it actually makes it easier to manage your bare metal servers as well.
That's true.
Why else? Why
Um,
else wouldn't you want to be doing containers? I think it's
Containers, well, a Docker container is not ideal for a GUI-based application. Docker is generally meant for CLI-based applications, whereas with VMs you'll have a lot more flexibility with a GUI-based application. I think is a big thing I've come into as a developer.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Obviously, desktop apps. Yeah, you don't. I mean, there's no GUI, so I'm guessing, yeah, any application, but yeah, where you want the GUI, that's not a go. And then how about the Wind? I mean, do you have any idea about the Windows side of things? I know Windows announced at one point they'll make it native, and they
Yeah,
start supporting. I know like if at least for some applications, if you're running .NET Core and stuff, then you can run it in Linux containers. But real Windows applications and containers, any idea?
no, they don't really go hand in hand. Containers are generally Linux or Unix based at the moment for most compatibility. Yeah, Windows support is not great at the
Yeah, yeah,
moment. I know this is myself having tried to run some Docker applications on my old Windows laptop, and I had an absolute nightmare. Which you listened to me for a long time complain about, Hassan, till I got on a Unix based machine on Mac. So a lot happier now.
yeah.
The native like there is, you can get a Docker for Windows stuff. It just doesn't work that well natively. I know a lot of the with Windows 10 you can get Ubuntu native on the machine. Just put Docker on that if you want to test anything on a Windows machine. Is my big recommendation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think let's maybe perhaps get into how folks. And by the way, if anyone is out there tried running Windows applications on containers, would love to hear from you on your experience and how's that working for you. I don't know many people who's done that, so I'd love to hear. So today's topic, like we said, we're going to be covering a lot of things. We'll be doing a lot of demos. This is just kind of like an intro to the whole series. In this, yeah, today I think we'll just quickly cover, if you want to get started with containers, never done containers before, what should you do? So first thing is, I would say go to docker.com, Docker website. Get the Docker toolbox. You'll get something called Kitematic, which is like a UI for Docker. You'll obviously get the Docker engine that can typically run, depending on whether you're running on a Mac or Windows machine or Linux. The Docker engine can either run in a virtual machine, so it'll expect you to have VirtualBox if that's how you want to run Docker, or it will run in HyperKit. So I think it's the native, or maybe like another type of virtualization for Mac. On Windows, I think with the new Ubuntu kernel, I'm not sure if you can run it there as well. I'm not sure if they support it yet on normal Windows, but typically what I've seen is that the Docker engine will run inside a virtual machine. And Docker Toolbox kind of takes care of all of that. So all you need to do is basically get the Docker Toolbox. Brian, anything you want to add to that before I just start showing kind of?
No, I think you gave a pretty good overview of how to get started there with Docker.
Yeah,
There's not much more to it. It's just you just need to learn how to package up and build your Docker files. Then it's a big thing. I think you've got a little demo on how to do that, Hassan.
yep. Let's see here if we can. Let's just go to. Just want to share my screen here. Um, there we go. So Kitematic. So this is a little, at least on Mac or on HyperKit, and that happens automatically when you install Docker Toolbox. So the nice thing is with Kitematic, at least if you're a beginner and you don't want to get down to the CLI immediately and you just want an overview of what's there. So one of the nice things about Docker, and which kind of like helps getting started, is containers both from the community and also from vendors. So it's excellent. It's a really great way to get started. And what you'll see the amount of numbers that people have pulled these different containers, so you can see whether things are. You'll kind of get an idea of how how what's that called? How trendy things are, or how how good they are with the community, or with the feedback from the community at least. With Kitematic, you kind of have the same. It hooks up to Docker Hub as well, so you're gonna have access to it here. So I don't know, what should we get started with? What should we search for? Any ideas? Any suggestions from anyone out there? Brian, do you have any suggestions as well? Okay. So basically, let's just say, yeah, let's say WordPress. Everyone typically works with WordPress, right? Everyone's tried that. So here you go. You'll find quite a few different WordPress images. So one thing to notice is there's a few things here. One is you want to always check out the documentation on Docker Hub. You can directly click, if you click the view on Docker Hub, it'll take you to the documentation. It always has some like important details because so for starters, you have the different tags. So depending on what kind of, like, let's say if you have plugins with Docker and it's like specific specific version that you need of, let's say, PHP or whatever, you can kind of have you can pick them from there. Another thing is often you'll need things like DB host, you'll need things like user for a database, etc. All these like parameters are set or are set as environment variables, and you kind of have to know them. And the only way to know what kind of environment variables you have to set is by looking at this here. So let's go back. So the documentation is really important when setting up any of these tools, but it's as simple as this. You basically click create, and it will download, connect to the Docker Hub, and it will download the image. I've already got like a few images here. So what I'll do is let's try something really straightforward. A hello world on Nginx. This is a classic, right? So let's just create a container from this. So what we have here now is it's downloaded the image, it's on my laptop, and it's created an instance of that image, which is the actual container. Now what it's also done is, you can see a preview here. So it's because under settings, what you'll see is the different ports. So it's listening on port 80 inside the container that's exposed on this port here. And because it's here under ports, it's basically, Kitematic is smart enough to know that and can give me like a direct link to the site. So fantastic. I have a container running with Nginx locally with the site. Another thing is, so depending on the container that you download, in the Docker file of that container, some will have volumes enabled, some won't have any volumes. Volumes, it's kind of like when you're dealing with VMs and you have, you basically have a drive attached to that VM. This is basically the same concept with containers. To kind of have persistency in the container, you can attach a volume, which is then accessible and is like mounted. Now, what this also means is that I can open, if I enable volumes, I can open this folder, and now I have direct access to the files. So in this case, it's just an index.html file. So if I open this up and let's say change it, and this is, I think, typically stuff that you kind of like want to do when you are when you're developing, right? You want access to your development files, your project from your IDE or text editor, whatever it is you're using, and you want to mount that inside the container. So I just changed this. I wrote yay. So let's go back and rerun this. Oh, it can't connect. So let's just restart it. And my changes are there. Fantastic. So this is basically the initial stuff. Brian, I'm just going to come back to you. Anything you want to add on the whole on the part that we just saw right now?
Using Kitematic to get started with containers. The big thing is just changing your Docker file, choosing your runtime you want, because you can go for your different runtime environments to make it bigger or smaller depending on what you want. If you want to use just the likes of Alpine Linux, have kind of a bare bones, it'll make your deployment package a lot smaller. It just depends what you want. You can only need to add in the packages that you really need. You can make I'm mixing up my words here, Hassan. Is there anything you'd like to add on that? All right.
I think we could. I think it's just really Kitematic is just really a simple way to get started. I mean, obviously, like it has its flaws. Like you realize as soon as you start doing things like multi-container, multi-tier applications where you want to split, let's say, you want to have database separate and you want to have the app tier separate, and this is typically the thing you want to do with containers. You need to start fiddling around with the environment variables, and you need to manually set, the IP or the name of the different containers and the environment variables. So, for example, a WordPress where it needs to know about the database. Normally, on a Kubernetes cluster, you'll use something like a Helm chart to specify these things, and they know where to find each other, and they'll use the service discovery, which we'll get into, with things like Docker Compose. You define the same thing, and they can dynamically look each other up, with all the containers that are in the Docker Compose file. With Kitematic, it's not as great to doing that. It's not great at doing that. So as soon as you start setting up some more complex scenarios, you'll realize that it's a bit tedious to work with. But it's a good starting point, and it's really easy to get started with, to get to know containers. So I think we have a look at perhaps how to do it just with just some of the basic Docker commands. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, I'm just going to pull up my little cheat sheet here just to have a flow. Okay, let's go back to desktop. So I have my terminal here. So some of the really simple things, obviously checking the version of Docker. You can see I'm running on one of the latest builds here. Now, these command lines I'm going to run through here are actually from the Docker tutorial. So if you go to docker.com and walk through the Docker tutorial, you'll see the exact same commands. So I'm going to pick these tutorials on purpose, or this tutorial on purpose. So if any of you want to try this, all you need to do is go to docker.com and follow the get started tutorial. So if I want to do something really simple as Docker run world, this Docker run hello world, this is like a container that's called hello world. It'll basically fetch it from the Docker hub and run it here, and this is the message that you'll get back. So, and it tells you exactly what happened. So what happened here is it attached to the Docker daemon. The daemon that pulled the hello world image. This is what happens when you put it there from Docker hub. A new container was created because we ran the run command, and finally that image has outputted what you see here on the screen here. So this is I think the simplest example of quickest thing you can do just to see if things are working and if you can connect to the Docker hub, depending on what sort of network you're behind. Brian, we know all about that, right? Being behind corporate networks. Sometimes you might need to use a proxy or whatever to be able to connect, because it's So next thing is I'm gonna run Docker image ls. This will show me the images that I have. So I have a bunch of here images that I've just built, which just have nothing in them. I have the WordPress and the Hello World images, which we just saw. The Hello World Nginx that we just ran, which had an Nginx server on it. You can see it's pulled it from Kitematic. It's 8 MB, 8 megabyte. So that's really, really lightweight. And that's the difference. I think one of the big differences between a VM. I think it'll be very difficult to have. I mean, I know you can with certain really slimmed down OSs, but 8 MB is really lightweight. And I think another thing that we didn't touch on before is the whole idea around resources. With containers, I'm obviously, when I start this, it's only the process. I'm only allocating the memory for that process. I don't need to allocate additional memory that I'm reserving. Whereas VMs, often you have to allocate, certain amount of disk space, a certain amount of memory, and if you don't do that, you have those challenges of having to do that later. I don't need to do that upfront with containers. So it's just like running any other process, which also gives me the ability of running hundreds of containers locally. So next thing is Docker container ls. This will show me what containers are running right now. So because WordPress, I ran it on my through Kitematic, that's running. It's been open for 3 minutes. And also the Nginx. And as you can see, these are like the different commands that are running. You always need like some sort of a command to run a container. You can't just start a container without having any commands inside of it. There is no thing like the init daemon, the systemd, or any other like system service that will control the processes, etc. That doesn't exist. So you'll just basically see that's what you see right here. And also what you need, what you'll see here also is the port is running on port 80. The port is running on port 80, and it's exposing. It's basically exposed on this port right here. So this is really simple stuff. Now, if I have any container that is not running any longer, I can add the all command or all argument, exactly the same, Docker container ls, and then all, and then I'll see like a few other containers that have been running but not running anymore. So this is really like the simple stuff. Now, if I wanted to set up a container or build like my own container, what I need to do is I need to have a Docker file. And Brian, I'm just going to come back to you just for a split second. Do you have anything to add on this part here?
No, I think you covered it pretty well there. There's nothing I could really add to that. You explained it all pretty well.
Cool. Okay. I know for the next sessions that you'll be going through some of the other stuff. You'll be showing us a little bit about Helm charts and some of the nice juicy stuff.
Exactly.
Minikube, etc. So
exactly. Yeah.
Fine. So I'll carry on here with creating my initial Docker file. So if I want to build a container, like what we've seen so far are containers from Docker Hub pulled. Obviously, in most situations, you'll need to build your own thing. Now, the first thing I want to do is, or typically what you do is you add this from command. From will basically say that this container is based on something else. I don't want to start building a container from scratch. I don't want to reinvent anything here. There's already a tons of containers out there which have like Ruby and Rails frameworks, PHP frameworks, Laravel, Python, Java, whatever. There's tons of pre-configured containers, and they are trusted containers from various trusted organizations. So what I'm doing here is basically saying, I want to build a new container and it needs to be based on Python, which is this image, and I'm choosing to go with 2.7, and it's a Slim edition. Again, if I go to Docker Hub, I'll be able to see the various editions and the various tags that exist or releases that exist for this specific, for the Python container. Now, typically the next thing I want to do is I want to set a working directory for my application. And what I also want to do is I want to add, so typically I would create this Docker file, in my application dir, so directory. So if I'm building an app, I would take and create this Docker file inside the working directory of the app. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically saying add whatever is in the current directory to /app, which will be inside the container. So I'm copying the content of the app inside the container. Now, if this was a Python, in this Python example, this is a Python app. So what I want to do is, let's say I have some additional libraries that I want to load. Flask and perhaps like let's say Redis. So what I can do is I can also use the run command to run a few commands inside the container when it's being built. And it will fetch that from, and it will use the requirements text, which we have to create in a second. Now, another important part is basically exposing the port that we want to be able to listen to. So that's port 80 in this case. And you can then set environment variables. So environment variables are really, really important when it comes to containers. It's become like de facto standard of passing on things like username, passwords, and maybe not necessarily passwords, but at least in dev you do that. But any argument that you want to pass on, so you don't want to hard code stuff inside the container. Instead, you keep it flexible by being able to like just passing on variables. So when you change, let's say from environment to environment, you can still just pass on environment variables, and it'll change the configuration of the container. And finally, what you need is something like a command which will when the container is launched, it will run this command. So before so in this case, because it's a Python app, we want to kick off Python. If it's a Rails app, we'd probably want to start the Puma application web server, or the Rails, if it's just in development, Rails server, the native one, or so whatever function your container has, this is the command that will trigger. Now that we got that in place, let's create our requirements text file, which will have the dependencies. We said Flask Redis, and let's also just have a simple Python app here. So it's basically just a Python app that uses Redis with a counter, and we basically have it's display the host name, and it will display the variable that we put as well, the name variable, and that should be it. So docker build, and it should be building now. Fantastic. And this is, notice one thing here. It's pulling different layers, and this is really an important concept as well with containers, and which make them lightweight. You don't, when you add commands in your Docker file, you'll be adding a new layer to that. So you don't have to recreate the previous layers. It's basically like your source code when you push it to Git, and you just push the difference or pull the difference, and you don't have to pull the whole thing. It's the same concept with containers. So both building new versions and pulling or pulling, let's say, things from Docker Hub. If you already have, let's say, the base images or whatever else, you don't have to pull the whole. It'll only pull the diffs. So it's really, really efficient in that sense. Brian, coming back to you.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add on this here?
Yeah, just based around the layers. How containers are is just basically a read and write only layer on top of a load of read-only layers, which you've specified in your Docker file. Just like your runtime variable, your environment variables, your runtime environment, and things like that. So it's just like your foundation. So if you change an environment variable, it'll only take out the layer that's supporting those variables and replace those. It won't have to manage every single layer or change every single layer, just the ones you've made changes to when you're building.
Yeah.
That all seems pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that.
What happened with it? And so here we go. So basically, it's built the container. It as you see here, the different steps are defined. So every line in the Docker file is basically a step. And you can see here it connected to, so this is basically, while it was building my image, this is what it went through, collected the requirements, installed the stuff that we wanted, and yeah, that's basically it. So we should have, I think, our new Docker container here somewhere. Python, here we go. We have the Python container, and I obviously haven't named my container, so I need to do that as well. That's it, and then you can actually just run that and have a play with it. We want everyone to try this, right? For the next time.
Yeah, definitely.
Because this is really just the starting point.
Yeah, we're going to get a lot more in depth as the series progresses. We're going to step through different areas of containers. It's good to have a working foundation of it, having tested it yourself before we kind of dive deeper into the topics.
Yeah, cool. I think we've, and I'm cautious of the time as well. I think we've spent quite a lot of time already.
Yeah.
So perhaps we should close it off here. And next week, I think what we'll do is we'll have a look at Minikube.
Yeah. And getting started with Kubernetes and orchestration.
Yeah. I think we'll look at
that sound good?
Yeah, we'll look at and start deploying to that, similar to what we did today.
Yeah.
Great.
Any questions, just leave us some comments if you're watching afterwards or anything, and we can, anything you'd like us to go over next week, just let us know. We'll be happy to help out.
Cool. Thanks a lot for watching.
Thanks.
And see you next week.
Bye.